Hello and welcome to the Scientology Money Project on YouTube with your host, Jeffrey Augustine. How about that intro Apostate Alex made me? Shout out to Apostate Alex. He does great work. I like that intro. So welcome. Today we're going to talk about something that went viral, and that's President Trump's commutation, not pardon, and we're going to get into that, commutation of Scientologist David Gentile's 10-year prison sentence. 7 of which he had to serve, 3 which was supervised released. And we're going to get into the details. Denise, hello. Glad you're back again. This whole issue with the pardon is crazy. No kidding. And Trump's pardon of David Gentile has gone viral. New York Times late last night broke the news. And it's on Reuters, Guardian. It's gone all over. So Office of Special Affairs has a PR nightmare, and this thing, it has some legs. This story's far from over, and we're going to get into explaining everything. How high up was Gentile in Scientology? That's a great question. He was a very low-profile Scientologist in terms of like public facing. I don't know where he was at on the grade chart, if he was a clear or an OT, because they didn't publish anything about him. And sometimes, like when Tom Cruise, they never publish his completions. They never publish his donations. They never publish him with IS trophies. Same thing with Travolta. So there's some people who they keep low key, but are very highly active. I know that David Gentile was very much into the church, working with other Scientologists, which is going to become a problem for him, I think. I identified over 50 Scientologists he worked for, probably about 10 companies he overpaid for in the millions of dollars. And so he was very well known in the church, in the Scientology Money Club, what I call it. But the church, when they keep a member like that hidden and low key, it's because they have something to hide. So I hope that answers your question. He was a big player, but he wasn't like Grant Cardone. He didn't do social media. In fact, there's not a lot of pictures of David Gentile. He stayed in hiding, just like David Miscavige, which is -8 on Scientology's tone scale. Yeah, that Alex did a killer intro. Check out his blog. So we're going to get into it. His best friends, suddenly, David Gentile, David Miscavige, and President Trump are best friends because there's crime involved and all kinds of things that need to be covered up, and there's money. No, Karen did not know Gentile. He didn't get into the church until around 2011, 2012. Okay, so did not know him. But I know plenty of people who knew him who left the church. And why, thank you. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Pam Blondie, Florida politics. Yes, you have that exactly. We're going to get into Pam Blondie, Attorney General of the United States. So these are the 3 bad actors, but there's more. There's a whole lot more. And it was last night, 9 p.m. to get ready for Sunday. Trump frees fraudster just days into 7-year prison sentence. David Gentile had been found guilty for his role in what prosecutors described as a $1.6 billion scheme that defrauded thousands of investors. Correct. And the New York Times article is outstanding. I recommend you read it. Now, Reuters, this is the pith of the matter. Why Donald Trump's White House is just lying about a lot of stuff. So Reuters, these last 2 paragraphs. Following reporting of Gentile's sentence commutation, a White House official told Reuters that the Biden administration's Ponzi scheme claim was, quote, profoundly undercut by the fact that GPB Capital had explicitly told investors what would happen, unquote. No, that's an outright lie. GPB Capital, in its first 2 private placement memorandums, did not say that they would take investor money to repay investor money, because that's a Ponzi scheme. That's the definition of a Ponzi scheme. And this is David Gentile with his hand up whose ever ass in the White House, the unnamed official. That's David Gentile's story. It was only after they were caught and they hit a regulatory tripwire did Gentile and Schneider decide to sneak language into the private placement memorandums, which were given to broker-dealers. And whether the broker-dealers disclosed those to the investors, well, they didn't. And there's good evidence to show the broker-dealers hid that fact. So the question is, can you make a crime legal because you put it in a contract? In other words, could David Miscavige or David Gentile, I confused the two, they're both crooks. Could David Gentile put something in a private placement memorandum saying that we can take new investor money to pay existing investors? While his broker-dealer represented this as an 8% return, is bullshit. You cannot make a crime legal because you put it into a contract. It's unconscionable, unenforceable, and it's a fraudulent contract. It's fraud ab initio, fraud from the beginning. I'm not a lawyer, but I know enough about this stuff, being a private investigator. And we're going to have a lawyer on. I'm talking to a securities lawyer I want to have on. And one left, unfreaking believable. It is. So David Gentile is trying to argue that, hey, wait a minute, I put that in the private placement memorandum that I can take money from new investors to pay old investors. That's fraud and that's a Ponzi scheme. But he's saying because I disclosed it, I shouldn't go to jail. That's a dirty contract, which he learned from Scientology, which is all based on dirty contracts and binding arbitration and all the other bullshit. David Gentile, narcissist, Scientology-enabled narcissist. He will go to his grave believing he didn't do anything wrong. He's a very delusional criminal, and he is a criminal, and we'll get to that. So Gentile tried to claim that because I put this language in, which my broker-dealers did not disclose to investors, I didn't commit any crime. Yeah, you did. This third paragraph, the unnamed White House official says, quote, at trial, the government was unable to tie any supposedly fraudulent representations to Mr. Gentile, unquote, said the White House official, who spoke on condition of anonymity due to not being authorized to speak on the topic. So this is the kind of bullshit the White House is doing. You've got this guy who's a dirty Scientologist, and you have a White House official. Look, this was an 8-week trial. This was an 8-week trial, jury trial. The jury convicted Gentile and Schneider in 4 hours because the evidence was so overwhelming. Gentile and Schneider, the criminal defendants in GPB Capital, burned through $150 million in legal between civil and criminal. Jury demolished them in 4 hours. So for this unnamed White House official who was not at the trial, likely, who probably didn't read the trial transcripts, at trial, the government was able to tie any supposedly fraudulent representations to Mr. Gentile. That's an outrage. That's just a lie. I hope we find this unnamed White House official, because this is really, might as well be Scientology's Office of Special Affairs. And Gentile was convicted because the government tied fraudulent representations to Gentile. And they did it. And it wasn't just about the private placement memorandums. A private placement memorandums, by the way, is in private equity, which is not the stock market. And there's a saying that private equity is where money goes to die. Before you invest in private equity, which is Grant Cardone or David Gentile, others, you're supposed to get a private placement memorandum which describes the risks you'll take. It's generally thought that private equity, you'll make more money than the stock market, but so many Ponzi schemes begin in private equity because it's basically unregulated. If you stay under $50 million, like Grant Cardone does, you don't even have to do any reporting. It's almost as good as being a religion. Maybe it's a religion. So, hey, Style Audit 1A, glad to have you here. I like your avatar. So, hello. And I'm going to go back to this. So anyway, this bit from Reuters, Reuters could have done a much better investigation. They just quoted verbatim. So Reuters, at least they got the White House spin on it. Now, the pith of the matter of the criminal trial was this. Jeff Lash, who was one of the people indicted, it was Jeff Lash who was in the car business. He started with David Gentile with his Volkswagen dealership, and Jeffrey Schneider. Lash allocated in federal court, and he says, the defendant here, on April 28, 2016, I, along with David Gentile, initiated an interstate wire payment of approximately $1,050,000 from my personal Chase Bank account to the Gentile Prime Brokerage Automotive Portfolio Chase Bank account. I knew that the money would be booked and falsely be represented as revenue in the financial statements of the automotive portfolio. Lash continues, I was aware at the time that such funds were not revenue and would be provided to investors and prospective investors to induce them into investing money in the automotive portfolio. Some of the investors and prospective investors were located in the Eastern District of New York. I knew at the time what I did was wrong. And the court asked, is there any representation as to the interstate nature of the wire transfers? And Lash's attorney stipulates that there was interstate. So that's wire fraud. And Gentile was convicted in part on wire fraud. That's one of the 5 felonies he was convicted on, wire fraud. So what happened, to summarize it, Gentile couldn't make his numbers for a particular year. And so he had Lash transfer in $1,050,000, which they booked as revenue. So they cooked the books. That's a fraud. That's wire fraud. Straight out wire fraud. The banking evidence was there. Lash's personal account into Gentile's corporate account. The accounting showed that as revenue. That was lying to investors. They didn't want to show a loss so they could keep raising money. Is the pardon fightable? Is there a path to regard strength? We will get to that. Thank you, Jeffrey Augustine. Glad your last name is an Epstein. I know, me too. That'd be a terrible name to have. I'm glad, Cat down the road. Hi, Jeffrey. Glad to catch you live. Hi. Well, I'm glad you're here live. And we have some noise. What is that? Hold on. Yeah, Karen. Sorry, I had to check. I'm not sure what that was. It is Brandana. Yes, my executive assistant. We had a matter in the neighborhood earlier, and I didn't know if it was related to that. I'm sorry for the interruption. Yeah, it is Brent. By the way, Brandana will be here. So, okay, so David Gentile was convicted on wire fraud because Jeff Lash, who allocated, said that they booked phony revenue, and they did put that language in the private placement memorandum, but did not persuade the jury. So the White House is lying, and for the White House to say that we're overriding a jury decision, it's an insult to the system, especially when they don't have the facts right. So there you go. So that's all there on my blog, that there was an interstate wire fraud. That's a federal crime. I think there were 3 counts, and securities fraud. So Gentile was convicted on 5 felonies. Now, Trump has been, this is from Yahoo News today. It's covering Gentile's pardon. And it's also noting that Trump has been called to account for his profligate use of pardons, as in Rudy Giuliani, etc. Now, this just happened. Okay, this puts the lie to the White House commutation of David Gentile. GPB Capital had auditors who helped Gentile cook the books. And David Gentile is a CPA, I think he lost his license after his conviction. So he had outside auditors who helped cook the books. On November 24, 2025, just last week, District Judge Alan D. Albright of the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Texas, that's where Schneider's located, approved a $46 million settlement resolving investor claims arising from the GPB Capital fraud litigation. Class plaintiffs allege that the auditor defendants negligently prepared false and misleading audits and approved and distributed false and misleading financial statements for the GPB funds. Plaintiffs further allege that GPB and its affiliate Ascendant Capital, that's Schneider's company, relied on a high-pressure sales force to market the securities to investors and used money from later investors to fund interest payments to earlier investors. So the auditors who were dirty, who worked in collusion, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Okay, what's the difference between a pardon and a commutation? Okay, so if things that don't make sense. The auditors agreed to settle for $46 million with investors and they didn't face criminal charges, and they could have. So this was not addressed by Trump, and that is an interesting part of it. That just happened last week, and it happened right before Gentile's commutation. There's Pam Bondi, Attorney General of the United States, speaking at Scientology's Flag Land Base in Clearwater, Florida. That's at the Fort Homicide Hotel, as we call it. They call it the Fort Harrison, but we call it the Fort Homicide because there's been a lot of mysterious deaths and suicides at the Fort Homicide, most notably Lisa McPherson. So that's Pam Bondi, who is a longtime friend of Scientology. And she's certainly, Tony Ortega's post today indicates she would have been most active. I think it would have been John Cole, but we're still investigating. And Patricia Duggan, a major donor of the Church of Scientology, has given MAGA Incorporated more than $5 million in this election cycle. So between John Cole, Trump's lawyer, who's married to Greta Van Susteren, as I covered my last podcast, Patricia Duggan, Pam Bondi, there's a lot of people who David Miscavige could call and say, hey, you need to get my guy out of trouble. And now the question here, what is the difference between pardon and commutation? Now, this slide here, basically, you can freeze it later. I'll read through it. A commutation means you're not pardoned of your crimes. It simply means you don't have to serve time in prison. So here's how it works. And I know there's a misspelling in this because I had AI generate it. Okay, it was an artifact. So when you get commutation, you don't have to go to prison. And you can be 3 years into a 20-year sentence and have your sentence commutated or commuted, which just means you get out of jail free, but you still have the underlying felony conviction, or felonies, as in Gentile's case. So Gentile still is a felon, convicted of 5 felonies. So what happens on day 1, day 0, they're calling it, the president lets him get out of jail, commutes his sentence. You don't have to serve, but the conviction remains in place. The sentence still exists legally. You still have to serve the full term. So what I mean by that, David Gentile will still have 10 years of supervised release. And that means he still has to report to a probation officer. He's got to get permission from the government to do certain things. If he commits another crime during this, he could be sent back to prison. So he's not pardoned. He's still a felon. And it's interesting that that's as far as the Trump administration was willing to take this. And it's still egregious. He should have served time. You know what's interesting, before we get back to this, usually in dirty politics, you're going to serve some time. Jimmy Hoffa was sentenced to 13 years for various financial crimes, and he had to serve 5 before Nixon gave him a pardon, commuted, the remaining sentence and pardoned him. So usually in the world of dirty politics, the crook has to do a little bit of time before they pardon him. And this is what made this so unusual is President Donald Trump wanted Gentile out of prison ASAP, because I think Gentile did 12 days. And that's what shocked the world. And that's why it's gone viral. It's like even the mob connected cases like Hoffa, you're going to make the person do some time. Why do you want him out so bad? What does he have? What is he threatening to do? My thesis, and I could be wrong, is that David Gentile said, if I have to go to jail, I'm going to take down everyone else with me, meaning other Scientologists. And that kind of freaked him out. I interviewed Jesse Prince, who was Inspector General RTC Ethics, I believe, before Marty Rathbun held the post. And I could be wrong on titles. But I interviewed Jesse Prince, and it's on my Karen's channel, Surviving Scientology on YouTube. And Jesse, L. Ron Hubbard suspected David Miscavige when he was a young up-and-coming psychoterrorist of doing things he shouldn't be doing. And so L. Ron Hubbard ordered David Miscavige to be checked by Jesse Prince. And as Jesse tells the story, if you got sent to him, he was absolutely the hammer of God in that church. People were terrified of Jesse because he was a hammer. And if you got in a metered psych check with him, you weren't getting out. So Jesse tells the story, and I have it on audio talking to him. He said that that David Miscavige came into the psych check and said, look, if I'm going down, I'm taking everyone with me, and gave it all up. Gave up everything to Jesse. But that Pat Broker, who had, cut all the comm lines to Ron, David Miscavige and David Miscavige and Pat Broker cut all the comm lines to Ron. That David, once he was psych checked, and he was dirty, according to Jesse, David Miscavige ran to Pat Broker and said, you can't let this psych check go to Ron. So it never got reported. And Ron, who was having all kinds of problems, just forgot about it. So I think, in Batman, where Heath Ledger plays the Joker, he's talking to there's the Asian gangster on TV where they're meeting with all the mobsters. And the Joker says, I can tell the snitch, and he's a snitch. So I think Gentile did something like that. And I called it right, because I said Jeff Lash was the weak link in the chain, and he would allocute. He was early in, and he was smart to get out. So I think Gentile did something like that. If I have to go to jail, I'm taking down these other people. I'm not going to name them right now. I could rattle them off. One of them is Stephen Hayes, who tried to help David Gentile take back control of the company. And Stephen Hayes is the guy who bought Cult Awareness Network out of bankruptcy. He's a longtime Scientology attorney. Whenever he shows, you should pay attention. Whenever he shows up, it means David Miscavige has a real fear, and he trusts Stephen Hayes to get stuff done. Stephen Hayes shows up. Now, when David Miscavige is in big trouble and Monique Yingling shows up, then it's at the very top, living rent-free inside of Miscavige's head, as this thing with David Gentile was. So Yeah, Cult Awareness Network. So the commutation. So David Gentile, he was not pardoned. His sentence was commuted. He doesn't have to serve 7 years in prison. However, the remainder of his sentence, the 10 years, is still in effect. His sentence only legally expires when he serves out the whole 10 years. So he has, 10 years to go. Now, in order to get a pardon, he has to let the 10 years run out on his sentence. Then he has to go for 5 years with a spotless free record, and then he can apply for a pardon. So as I read it, and I said I'm not a lawyer, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but David Gentile serves out 10 years basically on probation, supervised release. Then he waits 5 years. So in the year 2040, December 2040, he can ask for a pardon, assuming he's still in his meat body, which who knows. This is freaking wild. Yeah, I watched your video from Friday. It's incredible how deep and wide the government's connections with Scientology go. Yes, in the Trump administration, I showed, Grant Cardone. Grant and Elena hosted Trump at a 10X event in 2024, and they're thick as thieves, and it gets worse because Trump pardoned CZ, the guy at the Binance crook, and let me see if I can show that. But he's pardoning a lot of high dollar people. The former Honduran president, who was extradited to the U.S. and tried for drug trafficking, sentenced to 45 years, Trump announced he'd pardon him. And to me, that's talking out of both sides of your mouth, because Trump's wanting to get rid of all the illegal criminal drug dealing aliens, except if you're a high value former president of Honduras, then you can get a pardon. Then you're not, an illegal criminal who needs to be deported and put in prison, So there's a lot of contradictions. Gentile was convicted for wire fraud, and the White House is spinning it as something having to do with a PPM, and he's just repeating David's line. Now, one group on Facebook, several groups have come up with the, and this is a lot of groups. I was surprised there's at least 24. They mentioned the lawsuit linking David Gentile to organized crime figure Michael Cherney, who helped provide the startup money for GPB Capital. Yeah, and Cherney has very close ties to Putin. Correct, because Cherney, whose daughters provided the seed money, he actually lived with Putin's cousin in Moscow, as I mentioned. So if you look on Facebook, they're pushing the links to David Gentile's links to Russian organized crime. So I'm going to develop that for another time. So that's that. I'm going to. That's that. Now, a couple things that bother me, and what's that, Brendana? Oh, my assistant. My assistant is saying that we have David Gentile. Really? David Gentile? He wants to go online? Well, let's let him. Okay, David, go.
I lost my job. I'm banned from TikTok. They just fired me, and the police are doing nothing. This is a man's world. I'm the victim. I'm the victim. I'm the victim.
Sure about that?
I'm the victim. You got exactly what you asked for.
Yeah, and that's David Gentile. I want to give a shout out to that channel. It's called Angry Cops, 1.5 million subs. This is a great channel. This is a great channel. Hey, do you want to see? Let's see David Gentile again, because to me, when Angry Cops put this up, and that guy is so funny. Shout out to him. Yeah, this is what David Gentile has been screaming, blaming everyone else. And it's so funny because this reminds me of David Gentile.
I lost my from TikTok. They just fired me, and the police are doing nothing. This is a man's world. I'm the victim. I'm the victim. I'm the victim.
Sure about that?
I'm the victim! You got exactly what you asked for!
Yeah, I'm the victim. So every Scientologist hate victims, but the minute they get in trouble, they're the victim. David Gentile and his bullshit that he says he's the victim of the government. He didn't do anything wrong. You know what? You can stick it. You're a criminal. And in fact, I shouldn't show this, but question. This and the Rev file is going to the government. Because a lot of people sent me stuff over the years. I was watching you, David. This and the Rev file. So yeah, David did a whole bunch of stuff. The AUSA, Assistant U.S. Attorney, could have charged him with a lot more stuff. He could have been charged, but suddenly he wants to be the victim, and he didn't do anything wrong. And you know, so he's the DoorDash girl. David Gentile's a bitch. He's the DoorDash girl times 1.6 billion. Okay, he's the DoorDash girl. And please make a spot with a yeah, I can spot the snitches. David Gentile's a bitch, and I think that's what he did. He's just a bitch. Can't have any respect for him. Now, what gets even weird? What's so weird is, and again, thanks to angry cops over for that, and I'm the victim. So anyway, a couple things that when I was looking at this, a couple things that struck me. Donald Trump has a pardon czar, and let me share this. And I didn't know this until I did some research, but he has a pardon czar, and let me see where the pardon czar is. Okay. The pardon czar that Donald Trump appointed is named Alice Marie Johnson. And she posted, let me get this up here. She posted on Twitter, and she posted, Thanksgiving's in her heart for all these people. She's saying, I am also deeply grateful to see David Gentile heading home to his young children. No, they're not young. And to see the Stotella brothers, who were drug kingpins, celebrating the holiday with their beloved 88-year-old mother. So Alice Marie Johnson, pardon czar. What makes her qualified to be a pardon czar? And should she even be a pardon czar? No. My answer is no, she shouldn't be. Because a little bit of digging, this gets pretty stunning. So let's just remove her, and we want to show who she is. So when I went to just basically you do what everyone does. You you know, my camera's in the way, so if I go down, I'm just looking to share stuff. Share screen. Where the hell is that? Okay, stop screen. Okay, so I wanted to know who she is, who Trump's pardon czar is, why she has that job. Now, Alice Marie Johnson, she basically was convicted and given a life in 1996. She was convicted for her involvement in Memphis cocaine trafficking organization. And this drug, she was a cocaine trafficker, and the group she was involved with, they were involved with the Colombians. They moved 2,000 to 3,000 kilos into Memphis. And I mean, that's a big deal. She's a gambling addict. It says she's a former gambling addict, which cost her job. She had a death in the family. Now, she says she lost her job at FedEx due to gambling addiction. That worries me as a private investigator. If you have a fixer, some dirty business, and you know someone with a gambling addiction, they're really vulnerable. Gambling addicts, you can make them very, very vulnerable to corruption. If you know she likes to gamble, that's so he hired put in someone who likes to gamble needs a lot of money. And I don't know if she's an active gambling addict or she went to recovery, but that makes her very vulnerable, especially if she's able to hand out pardons like candy. And Trump's inclined to pardon, now what her language is doing. One thing that I don't like about the pardons is she's calling drug traffickers. She's calling drug traffickers nonviolent drug offenders. No, a nonviolent drug offender is someone who got picked up for possession. A young person who deserves another chance got picked up for possession. They shouldn't have been charged. Obama pardoned a lot of those people who were picked up for possession. I don't think possession should ruin a young person's life. Very much a second chance. But Alice Marie Johnson she has a nonprofit. She positions herself as having played a very minor role and being a nonviolent drug offender, where she helped to move 2,000 to 3,000 kilos of cocaine for the Colombians in Memphis. And how many people killed? How many people did she help kill? The pardons are Alice Marie Johnson. You helped move 2,000 to 3,000 kilos of cocaine. How many people did that kill? How many families did it destroy? How many people did it put in prison? How many dead bodies did you leave behind by selling cocaine on the streets for the Colombians? That's why you got a life sentence. And because Kim Kardashian and Kanye West and the ACLU lobbied for her early release, maybe she shouldn't have gotten life. She did 21 years. But she was a merchant of death. And she was not a nonviolent drug offender. She was a drug kingpin. And it's all there. She engaged in cocaine trafficking, drug conspiracy, money laundering, structuring, which is a financial crime where you try to structure money into a bank account to money launder it. And it was a dozen individuals, 16 defendants, described her as the leader in a multi-million-dollar cocaine ring, dozens of drug transactions and deliveries. And she was connected to Colombian drug dealers. So she was a hard-hitting drug kingpin, drug trafficker. Why the hell is she the pardon czar? What qualifies her? She doesn't have a law degree. So she was convicted of conspiracy to possess cocaine with intent to distribute. You can see everything, money laundering, structuring. So was her sentence too harsh? I don't know. How many people did she kill? If you lost a family member, a son or a daughter, because Alice Marie had sold him cocaine, you would think she'd deserve life in prison. And she wants to paint herself as a victim, just like the DoorDash girl, right? And it gets worse. There's a, let me just switch. I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to start sharing this tab instead. Let me get another tab. So yeah, that's the pardon czar. And I want to show you something else. There was a newspaper article at the time in the Tennessee paper. Okay, so this is the pardon czar. Memphis drug dealer gets life in prison. A 41-year-old Memphis woman was sentenced to life in prison for leading a multi-million-dollar drug ring that dealt in tons of cocaine from 1991 to 1994. Alice Marie Johnson was, quote, the quintessential entrepreneur, said U.S. District Judge Julia Gibbons as she pronounced sentence Friday. Quote, and clearly the impact of 2,000 to 3,000 kilograms of cocaine in this community is very significant. Johnson was tried last year on cocaine conspiracy and money laundering charges along with Curtis McDonald and Shirlene McNeil. During the trial, evidence showed an operation with Texas-based Colombian drug dealers and their Memphis connections trading tons of cocaine for millions of dollars in cash. McDonald was sentenced earlier this month to life in prison for his part in the cocaine conspiracy and money laundering operation. McNeil received a 19-year sentence. So the pardon czar moved 2,000 to 3,000 kilograms of cocaine. And this is where, to me, it is, it's such utter and complete bullshit for President Trump, who screams every day about how much fentanyl is killing young people, and it is, and it's killing people of all ages. Trump goes on and on about fentanyl killing people, which it does, and he's right to go on about fentanyl and the Chinese involvement in it. Fentanyl coming up from south of the border from China. Trump's right. He's the chief law enforcement officer. And yet, when you have a drug kingpin who sold 2,000 to 3,000 kilos of cocaine that killed God knows how many people, you appoint her as a czar and she's a former gambling addict? Yeah, this is why it makes no sense. And I'm just saying, this person who did 21 years, maybe that's the right time, but I don't know. But if she killed people, then Trump can't have it both ways. If he's talking about fentanyl killing people and she sold 2,000 to 3,000 kilos of cocaine and we don't know how many people she killed, then it just seems, yeah. And I pointed this out. Wow, and Aaron is still in jail over complete BS. Aaron has served more time in jail now for a misdemeanor bail violation in Florida than David Gentile did for a $1.6 billion fraud, in which he screwed over 15,000 investors. So that's just something I point out about Aaron. He's got his own legal problems. He's raising money. Go watch some of his shows, keep his watch hours up because it's not going to be cheap. The cult, I think, cult of Scientology, definitely wants to try to get a hate crime enhancement on him, which would be a federal thing. So you got to watch it when you protest. And so meanwhile, David Gentile skates. Yeah, of course it's injustice. So, and we have a pardon czar with no training in law. She's not an attorney. If you wanted a pardon czar, you'd think you'd have someone with who was a criminal a criminal defense attorney, victim rights advocate. You'd think you would have someone that you wouldn't get a former drug kingpin who moved 2,000 to 3,000 kilos of cocaine. I was astonished. And the vetting, I don't know that they vetted her. I don't know what Trump was thinking. And there's a video, if I have it. So we have a former drug kingpin as our pardon czar, giving out pardons to very wealthy people. Some of the pardons that are ridiculous. I want to show you one. Now, the question of forfeiture, going back to my slide, when you get your sentence commuted, you may still owe criminal forfeiture, fines and penalties, or you may not. It depends how the president structures the pardon. David Gentile and his attorneys argued that he should not have to pay any criminal forfeiture of his ill-gotten gains. And remember, he's still convicted. There's still forfeiture questions the judge is considering post-conviction. So how this plays out is going to tell us a lot about how deep the fix goes. And so I'm going to share with you the Office of the Pardon Attorney. This is what I'm watching. Okay. So this again's Office of the Pardon Attorney. And you can go here and see all the pardons and clemencies. So David Gentile was granted clemency. That is, he didn't have to serve his sentence. But this is where things bifurcate and they get weird. And we have to get the actual pardon document to see how dirty this is. And there's two things we want to watch with David Gentile. So these are all, Trump pardoned insurrectionists and dirty governors, financial criminals. He pardoned one felon who was in possession of a gun. I could see letting a guy go if he just got clipped for, having a gun and it was a minor league thing. Second chance. There's second chances, and then there's corruption. And Trump, I think, tries, and his pardons are, I think they try to blend corruption and call it compassion. Just like our pardons are calls drug dealers nonviolent drug offenders. That's how she's trying to spin it. If you're a drug dealer, you're nonviolent because you didn't kill anybody. We saw Michelle Fiore, Scientologist, pardoned for wire fraud. She raised money for a police memorial, but spent it on cosmetic surgery and a wedding for her daughter. Now, there is a Lawrence S. Duran. Okay, Lawrence S. Duran, he was sentenced to 50 years in prison for an $87 million healthcare fraud. He was convicted on 11 counts of healthcare fraud, which is less than the Scientology chiropractor brothers, the Spina brothers, who are in prison. And conspiracy to defraud the United States, receive and pay healthcare kickbacks, conspiracy to commit money laundering, 18 counts, structuring to avoid reporting requirements. Again, structuring is a way of putting money in the bank so it goes under the $10,000 reporting threshold. Structuring is what a lot of drug dealers are picked up on. And so this all-star, Lawrence S. Duran, 50 years in prison for an 87, and he should serve, if he stole $87,533,000 from U.S. taxpayers, and we got to pay taxes, and this shitbag stole it, he belongs in jail for 50 years. He got pardoned, and it gets worse. It gets really worse. Because this is the question. Okay, so this is the presidential pardon. Executive granted clemency, Donald J. Trump. Okay, be it known that this day I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, pursuant to my powers under Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution, have granted unto the individual named below, quote, an immediate commutation of his sentence, of his entire sentence. So that means no 50 years to time served with no further fines, restitution, probation, or conditions. So I am waiting until the pardon attorney publishes it. If David Gentile has his entire sentence commuted and he gets no further fines, restitution, probation, or other conditions, then that makes it even dirtier. Because right now they were talking an astronomical amount of criminal forfeiture. And David Gentile said, I shouldn't have to pay anything. And the U.S. The prosecutor, there's an underlying civil case from the Securities Exchange Commission. They were going to look at forfeiture there. But Gentile, if he got the deluxe commutation, he would have to serve no time, but he would also be free from having to pay fines, restitution, probations, or other conditions. So in the case of Lawrence Duran, his restitution would have been $87 million. And if he'd only paid, say, $2 or $3 million of that, then he'd get to skate on the other 85 million. I don't know the amount of it, but this is so corrupt. This makes America feel like living in a third world country where you can just buy justice. You can just go buy something from Trump. It's that blatantly for sale. I'm disgusted. Funny how Pam Bondi is helping John Travolta convict a person that stole money from him. Oh, I'm so glad you shared that. Yeah, you can Google it. John Travolta's, I guess, was it his aide, his assistant, stole some money. You steal from a Scientologist, Xenu help you. They're going to incinerate you. You stole from the government. You need a pardon because you're a victim. You're a victim. And yeah, so Travolta is a victim, but Gentile was used by the government, right? He was falsely accused and he didn't do anything. He did nothing to deserve what happened to him. And you know, it's just not right. So let me just see. We got to do it once more for the hell of it. David Gentile, tell us your story. Please tell us, David.
I lost my job. I'm banned from TikTok. They just fired me, and the police are doing nothing. This is a man's world. I'm the victim. I'm the victim. I'm the victim.
Sure about that?
I'm the victim! You got exactly what you asked for!
That's right. You got exactly what you asked for. You got exactly what you asked for. And I think I'm the victim. I think I'm the victim should probably be Scientologists' new, instead of saying something could be done about it, their new saying for Church of Scientology is I'm the victim. I'm the victim. And, you know, it's victim porn. That's what David Gentile is engaging in, is victim porn. And he is the DoorDash girl. He's a bitch. And, but you know what? He made a lot of enemies. He made a lot of enemies. And he's still got to do 10 years, then 5 more before he can ask for a pardon. And a lot of stuff can happen, and a lot of new evidence can come to light. Things in the red file can come to light. And I don't know that he's out of the woods. He doesn't have to go to jail. Now the other question we're waiting for is his criminal co-defendant who was convicted, Jeffrey Schneider, who ran the broker-dealer network. So David would raise money and buy all this stuff, but Jeffrey Schneider had the broker-dealers who sold GPB products to the 15,000 victims. And he was sentenced to 9 years, had to serve 6. He doesn't have to surrender till January 16. He's trying to stay out till May because he had back surgery. And he wants, but you know what? The government has medical facilities for prisoners. So even if he needs some special care, they can make arrangements for that. Schneider is doing everything he can to stay out till May 2026, and then he'll extend it beyond that. He'll have some other problem, some other physical problem, and he's just trying to stay out. Now, did Jeff Lash get a commutation? We don't know yet. We don't know. He would have applied. Yeah, you know what? This is funny. A victim is one of the worst things you can possibly be in Scientology. Yes and no. If you're a regular, you know, day-to-day life, the worst thing you can be in Scientology is a victim. Yes. But the minute you're in trouble, oh, you are the victim of plot by Big Pharma, SPs, the Rockefellers, the Masons, the Vatican, SMERSH, the Marcaps. You're a victim. You're a victim, and you're being persecuted for your religious beliefs. Why are you attacking my religion? Hey, Jeffrey, great to see you. Wonder how Dream Exchange stuff is going to play. Oh, yeah, Joseph Kalla. I think it doesn't come to a good end. There's an investigation on Dream Exchange, more Scientology crime. I always tell people that Scientology and crime are like Ubers at LAX. If you miss one, another one will be right along shortly, or a Waymo. So you don't have to worry if you miss one Scientology crime, another one will come along. It's guaranteed because it's a culture of criminality. You know, the only crime in Scientology is getting caught. I've said that often. That's the only crime. So we have a drug czar who sold 2,000 to 3,000 kilos of cocaine, commuting the sentence of David Gentile, who's a privileged white male, grew up in a wealthy home, and stole a lot of money. If there was ever a case of white privilege, corrupt white privilege, it's him. Why is Scientology always attacking the Illuminati? Well, they have to have an external enemy, as all groups do. And they believe that the psychiatrists who came from the planet Farsec is out to destroy Scientology, which they believe is mankind's only hope of freedom, when it's in fact is a human trafficking criminal cult, and it's involved in all kinds of financial crimes. So I've got some other stuff too. One thing that bothered me about Trump's pardons, the Binance guy was pardoned, okay? But now look what happened to him. This is something I wanted to show on the other show, and I didn't. And oh, damn it. Okay, so Trump gave Sleazy, as he's called, it's he's a cryptocurrency guy. Trump said he wanted to end the war. Shengpeng Zhao, he was Trump pardoned him because he said he wanted to end the war on cryptocurrency, the Biden war on cryptocurrency, which is BS, because Trump makes a ton of money on crypto. He was pardoned and he had to pay 4.3 billion, but now he's accused of facilitating payments to Hamas, Hezbollah, and other terrorist organizations. The billionaire Binance founder pardoned by Donald Trump has been accused of facilitating millions of dollars worth of payments to Hamas in the wake of its attack on Israel on October 7, 2023. A complaint filed in U.S. federal court on Monday by American citizens whose family members were murdered. So after he gets pardoned, he's mired in other legal problems. And this was a problem with Sammy the Bull Gravano. He allocated to all the murderers and people he killed, and then he winds up getting himself in trouble again. So David Gentile, once you're a criminal, you're always a criminal. I don't know if David Gentile, now that his sentence is commuted, if he's lost his privileges at Flag, or if they'll let him back in Flag Land Base. You know, that's a curiosity. So this whole thing, I got David Gentile, not some court records. Just checking through to see if anything I missed. Oh yeah, we're gonna watch this. We're gonna watch Carolyn Levitt. We're gonna watch her talk about Trump's views of pardons, and this is more stuff that I wanted to show you, the kind of the spin that comes from the White House, and the spin that comes from the White House. So this is Carolyn Levitt, White House spokesman, talking about Trump and pardons and how carefully they vet it, which is nonsense. And we're going to start with Carolyn. Let's go big screen.
To move forward. Karen.
The second question, President Trump said to CBS in the 60 Minutes interview that he did not know the Binance founder, which he pardoned. What exactly did he mean for that? I know it caused
He means he does not know him personally. He means he does not have a personal relationship with this individual. And when it comes to pardons, the White House takes them with the utmost seriousness, and the president understands the responsibility that he has as president to issue clemency and issue pardons to individuals who are seeking that. That's why we have a very thorough review process here that moves with the Department of Justice and the White House counsel's office. There's a whole team of qualified lawyers who look at every single pardon request that ultimately make their way up to the President of the United States. He's the ultimate final decision maker. And he was very clear when he came into office that he was most interested in looking at pardoning individuals who were abused and used by the Biden Department of Justice and were over prosecuted by a weaponized DOJ. And the individual you're referring to, that was certainly the case. Even the judge in his case said that the sentencing that the Biden administration was asking for was egregious and went too far. And so the president is correcting that wrong, and he has officially ended the Biden administration's war on the cryptocurrency industry. And I think that's the message he sent with this pardon.
Now, let's just stop sharing her. Now, what Carolyn Levitt said, you know, Trump's very involved in crypto, so it seemed very self-serving to pardon the Binance guy, and only to turn around and he's allegedly sending money to terrorist groups. She said they carefully vet everything, but they didn't carefully vet anything. With Binance, the guy was a criminal, so they're spinning it as ending the war on cryptocurrency, which means opening the door, because virtually all of crypto is scams, Ponzi schemes. Very few legitimate, in my experience investigating crypto fraud as a private investigator, it's almost always a Ponzi scheme of some kind. So now drug traffickers are nonviolent, or drug dealers, drug kingpins are nonviolent drug offenders. You have to end the war on cryptocurrency so Trump can make money on cryptocurrency. And he didn't know the Binance guy. So maybe Trump didn't know David Gentile, but he knows Trish Duggan. He knows her in about probably total $7 million, 7 million different ways that Trish said, I love you. So Trish Duggan, Scientology billionaires, has Trump's ear. So does John Cole and Greta Van Susteren. So does Grant Cardone, and more than a few Scientologists. And they had to get their guy out because I think, again, David Miscavige was worried that if they didn't take care of this guy, but the most the White House was willing to do was not a pardon, but a commutation. Okay, you don't have to stay in jail, because I think the White House saw it was pretty dirty. We don't want to do this, but Trump said, we got to do Scientology a favor. And this guy's high risk for talking. And he has some connections to a Russian oligarch named Michael Chernaya, who's living in exile in Israel because there's an Interpol arrest warrant for him. And he has ties to certainly organized crime because he was involved in waste management. And I'm surprised that didn't go deeper and there weren't arrests, but purported ties through 5-Star Waste Management. And that's a different story, those purported ties. Why did the waste management component of GPB Capital lose, I think, 80%? It's huge. He's also involved with Trump's son's crypto business. It never ends. No, it doesn't. And it looks like right now Trump's just selling pardons. So right now, if you're an illegal selling fentanyl, you need to be put in prison and deported. But if you're the former Honduran president who moved tons and tons and tons of cocaine, such that the Biden administration went and extradited you, tried you, and sent you to 45 years in prison, you need to be pardoned because you're a nonviolent drug offender. This whole thing is so fucked up. It's so fucked up. And this is why the story of David Gentile's pardon went viral, and it's not going to end, or I'm sorry, his commutation went viral, and it's not going to end. My prediction is that David Gentile's story will have legs. And I think there's plenty of other felonies the government could have charged him with. I think that the assistant U.S. attorney who prosecuted wanted a case the jury would understand. So they went for, obviously, the wire transfer from Jeff Lash. And they tried in a case they knew they'd have a 99% chance of convicting. They could have gone broader. They could have brought more charges. They chose not to. That's what they decided to do. They didn't see the commutation coming. They haven't commented. Being involved in the case from the early on when it first happened, when it was civil, I think it's just corruption at the very top, and David Miscavige is involved as well. He saw that there was a trouble and he applied the danger condition. Do you think Koss is involved with Epstein? Well, not at present because Epstein's dead. Was there past involvement? Here's what I know. GPB Capital, their guy who was in charge of biotech, Evan Marianthopoulos, came from Door Biopharma. Door Biopharma was run by Dr. Ralph Maxwell, whose wife was Mandy, was very good friends with Ghislaine Maxwell. And Mandy started a company with Ghislaine Maxwell. So there's an indication that through Evan Marianthopoulos, it's very possible that Gentile and the church could have been involved with Ghislaine. Now, this is just all circumstantial, but I want to show you something that and this is when I was searching, as I covered this story for a long time, and I'll show you what I think is a possible connection. But again, you develop a theory of the case, and when you investigate, you have to be willing to be wrong. You can't fall in love. You can't fall in love with your own theories. You have to be willing to throw them away like that. Here it is. This is an interesting, if you want a long form read, please read this. Okay. This is a really interesting thing. If you want to dig into the real substance of GPB Capital and Gentile and the precursors, this is an article that I spent a lot of time on. I'm proud of the work. Okay. Now, I was apolitical in this, and I wasn't even looking for Hunter Biden, so don't take it the wrong way. The background influences of GPB Capital Holdings. Whenever you investigate a criminal organization like GPB Capital, you investigate the precursors, how it came about, the creation and origin stories. The background influences of GPB Capital. Hunter Biden, a Jeffrey Epstein associate, a biotech company, and a Russian mob connection. I'll post this in the show notes. I did this on my blog in February 24, 2020. And I do the timeline. So 1995, Jeffrey Epstein and Amanda J. Mandy Ellison incorporate Ghislaine Corporation in Florida. Now, Mandy Ellison was married to the doctor who had Door Biopharma. And Evan Marianthopoulos worked at Door. In the meantime, future GPB insider Jeffrey Schneider is permitted to resign from Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner, and Smith after allegations involving foreign clients who placed trades reneged and then inexplicably vanished. So you can go to FINRA.com and check Schneider's broker-dealer record or broker record. Un momento, por favor. I don't know why people call me when I'm on the air. It was David Gentile telling me he was a victim. He just texted me. So this will give you like how all the pieces came together and name changes. This is an interesting thing if you want to dig down deep into the background. And I was doing this following David when he began working in his father's company, Gentile, Pismani, and Brengel, and what they did, how GPB Capital comes together. In fact, I even have General Alexander Haig, the late Secretary of State, working at Door Biopharma. And this was an interesting company and how they come into it, their prospectus. But this is where I find an Epstein connection through Amanda Ellison. And Dr. Ralph Ellison resigned. So there's Onyx Capital. Anyway, there's a lot of information that I developed. And there was a securities purchase agreement between Door Biopharma, Rina Chernaya, the daughter of alleged Russian mobster Michael Cherney. She purchased 2.2 million in Door Biopharma shares. Why? Their purchase is made through McAnna, a firm owned by Rina Chernaya and her sister Diana. Okay, now, this is where Bernard Pismani, David's father Santos' business partner, bought in as well. So basically, Sano Gentile business partners were involved in this thing that had to do with Door Biopharma and the Chernaya sisters. And that's where I think, I'm trying to figure out how the Russian mob money through his daughters goes into it. And this is the kind of thorough research you have to do. Robert Kessler, I was surprised. He's the agent for the Russian billionaire and reported mobster Michael Chernaya. Why he wasn't charged, he was involved in GPB Capital early on, and there's some lawsuits. So when you're going to do an investigation, you have to dig down deep. And this gives you, Dorbar Pharmacy's future GPB Capital Holding executives meet. David Gentile, Evan Marianthopoulos, Schneider, and Gentile meet in 2007. And I have the Russian mob. The stage is set. Now, this is where it's interesting to go back, even if there's not chargeable offenses because of statute of limitations, at least you know how it came about. And Trump's relationship to Russia, and I got to tell you, I have family in the nation of Georgia, so I follow the Ukraine thing very closely. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Trump's so-called peace deal is just garbage. It's garbage. Before you end this live stream, do you have an update on the female body found in the mountains? No, I don't. Look, this was a story. Female, approximately 60, found. She apparently took a 75-foot plunge down the side of a mountain. Some people have speculated it might be Shelley Miscavige. I don't know how Shelley would get off the base unescorted. It's not beyond the probability. I don't have any reason to believe or any evidence that it's Shelley Miscavige. Could it be? Sure, because I don't know. They would have to notify next of kin. They would have dental records. I mean, I don't know where that story goes. So some people have speculated that, and that's Jenna Miscavige, Liz Gale have said that could be Shelley. Could it be? It could be. Sure. I don't have any information on it yet. I hope it's not Shelley. That'd be a tragic and unfortunate end. But given her existing life, I don't know. So anyway, DoorDash girl David Gentile doesn't have to go to jail, but he's still on the hook for 10 years. And there might be some more felonies coming his way. Maybe some of the red file data comes up. I don't know. And so this is where the intersection of Scientology and the White House, it began, I think, it began with John Cole and Greta Van Susteren. Franklin Graham's involved with them. They're safe pointing the evangelicals. John Cole and Greta Van Susteren, as I covered, are safe pointing the evangelicals through Franklin Graham. And even though L. Ron Hubbard said that Jesus Christ was a lover of young men and boys, and I have this on my blog, in other words, a pedo, a chomo, L. Ron Hubbard said that Jesus was a chomo and that Christianity was an implant. So despite Hubbard's utter blasphemy of Franklin Graham's Lord and Savior, he just says, despite his religious differences with John Cole and Greta, that they're very dear friends. So he chooses to be uninformed, ignorant. In fact, someone called me about Franklin Graham, someone big. He chooses to be ignorant, uninformed, or not know. And he doesn't want to know. But if he really knew, if Franklin Graham really let it in, Hubbard's utter blasphemy of his Lord and Savior, I don't think he could have fellowship with John and Greta. I don't think he could. But they go way back. And that's why I think John Cole is very talented, as is his wife, Greta Van Susteren. That's why I think they've gotten maybe some special protection in evangelical circles that they wouldn't have otherwise, because clearly Scientology, part of its DNA is Crowleyan, do as thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law. And David Gentile is certainly showing Crowleyan logic here. And, it's so we're going to follow the story, but that's what happened. His sentence was commuted. The felony convictions remain in place. And he has 15 years to, get himself in more trouble. And the pardons are, who was degenerate gambler is what they call a chronic gambler. A degenerate gambler is what the casinos call them. And served 21 years for being in an organized criminal group that's trafficked 2,000 to 3,000 kilos of cocaine. None of this is so surreal. You can't make it up. So you got this crook in Long Island who's associated with Russian mob money getting to walk free. He doesn't have to go in prison, but he's still got the charges. He's still got the felony convictions. He doesn't get out of those. So this will get steeper. We're gonna watch and wait. Does Jeffrey Schneider surrender himself? And does he get his sentence commuted? If he doesn't, then Jeffrey Schneider, you should just flip. If you don't get a sentence like your bro, David Gentile, then you were a throwaway wog if you don't get a commutation. So that's one of the things I'm watching for as an investigator. Does Schneider get off the hook? Because if he does, because right now his paperwork that he's filed with the court, he wants to stay out till May. His surrender date hasn't been changed of mid-January 2026. So we'll see if Schneider doesn't get a commutation. Maybe he'll flip. I would. If they were going to throw me under the bus, I would say, fuck you, David Gentile. I'm going to turn. I'm going to go get the best deal I can so I don't have to go to jail like you. Yeah, it seems like this is well said. We'll conclude with this. It seems like the more power people have, the more they're willing to engage in outright hypocrisy. Oh, yeah, and outright fraud. Yeah, no kidding. This is so blatant and ugly, and that's why it went viral, and I think it'll continue. Why did Clinton grant the cult tax-free status? That's something I've never done a show on. I'd like to because it's a long form. I don't agree with the conventional wisdom at all that Scientology caved in the IRS because, like I said, in the 1980s, the FBI and the IRS broke the 5 crime families in New York through using RICO. The IRS criminal division, it used to be called Criminal Investigation Division, they're not scared of Scientology. Scientology was, the 5 families in New York, organized crime, they were bigger than U.S. Steel at their peak. And if they weren't afraid of them, they weren't afraid of Scientology. I think it has to do more with corruption. And Richard Reese, who was senior case supervisor at Flag International, was a roommate of Bill Clinton's in college. And there supposedly was a $5 million donation made through Richard Reese to the Clinton Presidential Library. And there were some other favors done that I haven't talked about, and it involved Monique Yingling, who is the major architect of tax exemption. And Monique is the most powerful, in my opinion, she's the second most powerful person inside of Scientology. And she's not a Scientologist, but she's a tax attorney, and a damn good one because she's protected Scientology all these years. Blinky McMuffins. So that's it. Any more questions before we go? Because I got more investigating to do. I got things to do. I might have a drink after this show. Sometimes don't you feel like you need just to have a drink? I feel like I sit down and drink and so intense show. Let's end with this. Watch the Hollywood Parade. Church of Scientology. Do they really have a volcano float? Is it a Dianetics float? Do tell. So is it because I got a call from Pope. I wonder if they just have a Dianetics float. This deserves 2 drinks. Well, I'll have one and, call over my pastor for another one. I don't have a pastor. So I'll go do my work. You kids get out of here. Have a nice evening. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. And what's that? I'm shocked too. I am shocked too. And again, we ask TV's Eric Estrada, what do you think of this whole mess with David Gentile and his commutation? No, it's not right. It's just not right. And good people, what are you doing? Yeah, that's how I feel about it. So thanks for watching. And I'll get what picture do I want to end on? Scientology, the B666. L. Ron Hubbard said he was the Antichrist. So we'll end with an image of the dragon coming out of the abyss. Big blue. Jeffrey Augustine. Until next time, thank you for watching.